This is the FrogCast.
FrogCast. We are so excited to be talking about actual college football and games that have been played this week. TCU is coming off of a 23-17 victory up there in the Twin Cities this last Thursday night on national television. And while it wasn't the prettiest thing to watch, it is better to get a win on the road than to come home with a loss. This week, we are going to break down everything that went right and everything that went wrong in the Minnesota game, as well as talk about steps the Frogs need to take going forward to continue to improve. We're going to take a look at that dumpster fire down in Austin and that excuse they have for an offense, as well as preview Oklahoma's trip to Knoxville this week. This and so much more will be on your third episode of the FrogCast. It is great to be here with Trey and with Daniel as we break down the first game that TCU had in this 2015 season. Fellas, it was not a pretty sight to watch us go up to Minnesota, but at the same time, we got a good win against a good team. I'm curious as to what your thoughts were in terms of what you were impressed with and some areas of concern that the Frogs need to address going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. The most important thing is that the Frogs won. And, you know, it wasn't that pretty. And I think personally going into this game, I thought the offense would look good, the defense would struggle, but the offense would score enough points to keep TCU ahead and get the win. But coming out of it, I felt pretty much the complete opposite. I didn't think the offense played up to expectations, and I thought the defense played better than I expected them to. So, you know, it was a little, you know, we all predicted kind of big wins for the Frogs, and they didn't pull it off. And I just think it was because everybody had such high expectations, but then you get brought back down to earth with a game like that. And, you know, it's going to end up being a huge positive for this team because it's going to give Coach Patterson and the coaches a lot of good tape so they can, you know, break down these players, and, you know, there's a lot of good learning opportunities there. But I thought, you know, we saw a couple good things from some young players. Sean Nixon had 5 catches. Kavonte Turpin had 2 catches and 3 punt returns. And it even came out earlier that Turpin was also going to be put on kick returns going forward. I think TCU has something special with him. I thought Aaron Green looked really good on defense. You know, a lot of people were concerned about Mike Freeze. I thought he played really well. I tried to pay, you know, really close attention to what he was doing out there, and I thought he looked really well. But there were some negatives. You know, offense on third down was 7 of 19. Boykin, I think, you know, really missed a couple key throws that he should make, and I think when he watches the film, he's going to be mad at himself for missing those throws. So, you know, he really needs to work on that. And then I thought special teams was a little weak. You know, Oberchrome had the missed field goal. I thought Ethan Perry kind of shanked a couple punts that, you know, he normally doesn't, you know, do. So there was some good, some bad. But, you know, the main important point is just they won, and that's really all that matters in week 1.
Absolutely. Coming back with a W is so much better than coming back with a loss. Daniel, you watched the game as well. What are some takeaways that you have on the positive as well as the negative from the Horned Frog victory up in the Twin Cities?
Well, I pretty much was going to say everything Trey just said. You know, I thought the defense was going to really struggle and the offense was going to have to cover it, but, you know, it wasn't like that at all. I was actually kind of surprised, but, you know, I watched it again on the internet, and we didn't look as bad as I guess it felt because of the expectations, and I was just looking for a blowout. I was like, this is going to be awesome, you know, and then sometime in the third quarter, I was just like, man, we suck. This is crap. And because it'd been hyped so much. But when I watched it again, it was actually pretty solid. The numbers really don't reflect it. Two passes the Boykin makes, and it's 37-10, and then they get their last touchdown just right at what was the last 2 minutes or so. So it wasn't that bad. I was freaked out at the time. Let's see. Defense wasn't as bad as I thought. Terrell Lathan tore it up. Like Trey, I was really watching for Mike Freeze, and he looked really good. I was for a freshman who didn't even play last year in high school, he was pretty darn solid. Tejada looked really good. I was glad to see Orr step it up and show that he can get the job done. And but the offense, it did have some struggles. I thought Aaron Green made some odd choices. Like there was one where he could have gone to his right, I think. It was wide open, and then he turned left for some reason and got stuffed. And anyway, that's pretty much what I took away from it. I was a mess right after that game, but I was happy that we won. I was like, at least we won. But the full takeaway is it wasn't nearly as bad. I overreacted, and I think a lot of other people did too.
Yeah, I think most of us overreacted going into the game, thinking that it was going to be Peach Bowl Part 2. And then the 24 hours or 12 hours after the game, I think we overreacted as well. I thought, I was already talking with fans and friends and my son, and we were like, we're going to drop out of the top 10. Everybody else is better than us this year. We should just prepare for another, 9-3 season. But with some distance, I think we're able to see that Minnesota is a good team. I mean, they're projected to come in first or second in the Big Ten West. The last team to win there was the national champions last year, Ohio State, who won by, coincidentally, 1 touchdown. And so this is a tough place to play. I was there, and I can tell you, I mean, it's not Tuscaloosa, but this was a tough environment, and it was a record crowd for a season opener there, and that place was hyped. There was a lot of energy, and so I was impressed with the Frogs' ability to get a win coming out of it. I think the name of the game for the Frogs this last game going into it was injuries. We had a lot of people that we knew weren't going to play. We knew that Deontay Gray was not going to play. We were fearful that James McFarland was not going to play. Davian Pearson didn't play. But then I believe it was the second or the third series, and I was handicapped because I was at the game and couldn't watch it on ESPN, and you didn't get much self-service in there either. Sammy Douglas goes down, and Trey Summers steps in there at linebacker as well. So we had a redshirt freshman and a true freshman there at middle linebacker. How much do you think we were hamstrung by the injuries, and how big a deal is this going forward if in worst-case scenario these guys aren't back for 2 or 3 weeks? Trey, what are your thoughts on the injuries of the Frogs?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely – going into this season, injuries were my number one concern because they can derail anybody's season, no matter how good of a team, if you can't – overcome injuries or if just, the injury bug plagues your team. And so, yeah, they were key. I mean, those were some big players missing for TCU. I thought Pearson being the biggest and then obviously Sammy Douglas going out early on. But from what I've read, it's looking like Pearson should be back by Tech, hopefully. The reports are saying he's dealing with the concussion situation and they're just trying to make sure he's, fully healthy before they bring him back, just being extra cautious. I think you're supposed to get McFarland back. I haven't seen, but I think we're supposed to get him back. And I haven't seen anything on Douglas yet. Hopefully we'll hear something from Coach Patterson at his press conference. But, I don't think any of them are too serious at this point, so I'm not too overly concerned. But, in general, I'm one of my things I'm looking for, honestly, over these next 2 weeks against Stephen F. Austin and SMU is just getting guys healthy. I'm hoping that, the Frogs are able to kind of get some leads in these games. And so the second string guys can get some reps and get the starters, a little bit of rest. I don't know, should happen against SFA. I don't know about SMU. They looked a lot better than I was expecting against Baylor. But then on the flip side, the Baylor defense wasn't that great either, so I don't think the Frogs would let SMU run all over them. But, yeah, on. Not a concern yet on the injury front, but definitely something to monitor these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, one of the things I saw, and I'm not in the business of calling out 19-year-olds that could whoop my tail, but when we had to move in our backup linebacker, when Sammy Douglas went down, I was down in the corner of the end zone where we were playing a lot of that second and third quarter, and in that second quarter, numerous times the ball would be snapped and he had his back turned or his head turned towards the safety, getting the call and getting the position of where he was supposed to be. And that is just a difficult spot to be in. And so I hope over these next weeks that not only does Sammy heal up, but it allows some of those players like Trey Summers, some of the other guys coming in, to be able to get their feet underneath them and get their head underneath them in this in this defense, to be able to shut down the offense. I will say that one of the things that disappointed me in the play calling was, other than the call that got reversed, I don't think we went deep to Colby Listenby but one time. And there were so many times that I saw him in man coverage with no safety over the top. And, I know I am not an offensive coordinator in Division I football, but I would go deep every single time. I would audible into that, if at all possible, every time somebody was in single man coverage with no safety help over the top. And so the play calling was a little questionable to me at times. I agree with you about some of the cuts that Aaron Green made. I don't ever want to see some of those situations again where we get stuck overthrowing a receiver. But all in all, it was as good as it was a pretty good first game. So, Daniel, you have any other thoughts to wrap up our thoughts on the Minnesota game?
Yeah, I guess I kind of forgot to mention how, Minnesota is actually a really solid team. Jerry Kill does a really good job. Like you said, it's a tough place to play. So maybe we were not giving them enough credit, leading up to the game. And maybe some of that was, part of our high expectations for ourselves, was not giving them enough credit, because they really played hard, and props to them. I kind of sort of became sort of a Minnesota fan, talking with some of their people online and stuff. They're a pretty good program, so they deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, the irony is 5 years ago, this would have been the marquee win that we hung our entire season on. By beating a Power 5 team in the Big Ten that'll probably come in first or second or maybe third in the Big Ten West. And now we're just looking forward to the next big game that we can get on the calendar that's bigger than this in order to get a big W. So it does remind us of the Mountain West days, that if we just win this game and keep moving forward, we're going to be all right.
My thing is, real quick to close out the Minnesota game, I'm going to preface it with, I'm a believer that TCU has to go undefeated to get into the Final Four. If they lose a game, then I don't know. I really don't have any hope for them getting in. So with that being said, I'm not concerned at one bit about style points. I saw it show up on Twitter Saturday night, Sunday, posing fans and those types, even media members talking about how TCU looked and all that. Style points don't matter one bit this season, and it just kind of infuriates me that it's even brought up, because if the Frogs go 12-0, they're in. They control their own destiny. There's not going to be 5 undefeated teams at the end of the season. I'll bet, my damn son on that, because it's just not going to happen. So if they go undefeated, they're going to be in. They control their destiny. I don't care if they win every game by one point, honestly. As long as they win every game, they're going to be in. And that's just kind of really how I feel. And I'm like you, Jeff, I don't want to pay attention to the rankings. All these, when they start doing the playoff ranking shows, I don't care anymore. After what we saw last season, I'm not watching. I'll watch the final one to see, what goes on. But other than that, I'm over it. I'm done. Even the coaches poll, AP, whatever poll you want to put in front of me, it's fun to look at. But honestly, I don't care this season. It's about one thing, and it's about winning all the games.
I could not agree with you more. I'm making a little commitment as a podcast person here. We're not going to project our Final Four. We did that at the beginning of the season, and that was fun. But ranking them in the middle of September, let alone the middle of October, I just think it's so stupid. We experienced firsthand how it doesn't matter until the last poll. So, and in terms of what you said about the media, about having to go undefeated, we referenced this before we recorded. Ohio State is losing at halftime to Virginia Tech. We heard for 3 straight days that TCU looked bad because they won on the road against a good team. I would guarantee you that Minnesota is going to be better than Virginia Tech this year, but the same narrative will not be driven. And so the Frogs just need to go out there, keep winning games, and this stuff is going to take care of itself. Because they don't have anybody backing them. The media will spin this however they want, and I'm not a conspiracy theory guy a whole lot. They want Ohio State to look good, and they look for a chance to badmouth the Frogs. So I think I can get some Frog fans to agree with me on that. Well, wrapping up the past and moving forward into our next game, we all agree that we do not know a hell of a lot about Stephen F. Austin other than that they are in Nacogdoches, I believe. But we need to do some things on
and they're the Lumberjacks.
They are the Lumberjacks. I know they got hot in the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago. I did
know
They're
purple, too, I think, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's about all I know.
That is right. And so we are at home this week at Amon Carter against Stephen F. Austin. Daniel, and then you, Trey, what are some things that we need to see this week in order to know that the Frogs made progress and got the most in terms of improvement from week 1 to week 2? What are some things that we need to see happen on the field this week to know that the Frogs are getting better?
I think really to show that we've improved, I don't want to see any of the overthrown passes. That's really all that truly was just mind-blowing to me, that the receivers were wide open and he just threw it one over and one somewhere. It was just bizarre. And other than that, I thought the run game was pretty good, but in the defense, not bad. They'll have some corrections to make, like you were talking about Summers just kind of looking around. That can't be happening, and I'm sure little things like that will get fixed. And they shouldn't have any problems against SFA, so I don't know. We'll see.
Trey, what do you think we need to do to know we improved from week 1 to week 2?
One thing is just cut down on penalties. They had 9 against Minnesota. Not a ton, but there's not really any excuse to be, having penalties against SFA. They should be playing a pretty clean game. I agree with Daniel. I like to see Boykin, work on his accuracy and just the offense in general. I think these next 2 games are going to be big for them, just for timing. Everybody talks about, they're in the second, year of this offense, so it should be better this year. And I know they've been practicing, in the spring and the fall, but it's still, practice is different from a game. There's a little bit different speed when you get, live against a different team. So, I think it's going to take them, the Minnesota game and then SFA, I think, to get their timing, get clicking, and I'm hoping after those 2 games when SMU gets here, they're, hitting, full stride. I'm hoping they just blow SFA out. No disrespect, but get up, get the young guys some reps. I mentioned it earlier. Get the young guys in there and get the first team off there, keep everybody healthy, get people healthy. That's really what I'm looking for. And they shouldn't struggle against SFA, so.
No, we should be able to handle this game and handle it early. My hope is that we air the ball out a little bit. I'd like to see some deep passes from Boykin to our wideouts and be able to pick up some big chunks of yards that way. I'd also like to see the backup quarterback in action. I would like the backup quarterback to have taken some snaps and moved the ball down the field before worst case scenario happens where he has to come in. And so I know that we have somebody listed, but I sure would like to see Sawyer in there throwing the ball around a little bit for the Frogs if we can get up by 30 or 40 points early. And as has been mentioned, I'd like to see some of the younger guys on defense be able to take some reps and get some confidence and know what the calls are and be able to react early and not waiting for the ball to be snapped in order to determine what they're supposed to do. And I think those things are going to sort themselves out. There is a reason we play a 1AA team. I think if Coach Patterson had his druthers, we would have opened with Stephen F. Austin and then played Minnesota the second week like we did last year, but it didn't work out that way. But I still think we'll get better going forward, and we'll have hopefully plenty of highlights to talk about next week as we recap the SFA game. Well, just quickly to wrap up here, one quick game I want to look at, and we'll just get a real quick hit from both you guys. Oklahoma travels to Knoxville to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Who do you guys pick in this game, and who has more to gain in this game? That's what I'm really looking at as we wrap up.
Honestly, I think the Big 12 conference as a whole has more to gain by Oklahoma winning. I can't really say much about Oklahoma just because all I saw was their highlights because their game was on pay-per-view. So I don't really know how great Baker Mayfield looked. I don't know, how much of their new offensive system they opened up. So, I'm pulling hard for Oklahoma, though. That's all I can say. And I think they have a legit shot of beating Tennessee.
Daniel, do you think the Sooners can beat the Volunteers?
Yeah, I think so. It's no guarantee. I don't know. From what I like Trey, I didn't really get to see a whole lot of that. I got to see a few minutes of Tennessee's game, and they took out Bowling Green 59-30. But so I don't know. I just have the feeling just from just a quick look at both of them. It's almost even matched about. So I really don't know. It could go either way because either one looked bad, but I wasn't all that impressed with either one either.
No, I just followed the score the best that I could, and I saw it took them a while to pull away from Akron. I think Terry Bowden is their coach at Akron, and it took them a while to pull away from that. Of course, they had more weapons. Of course, they had more athletes than Akron does. But I have a feeling the Sooners are going to win, but I also still think that Tennessee is going to make some noise there in the SEC East. So. Well, fellas, that will wrap up our third episode of the FrogCast. We love being able to recap the win up there in Minnesota and look forward to our next game against Stephen F. Austin. And
Hey,
we hope
Jeff.
that, yeah, go right ahead, bud.
I have to interrupt you, though, just real quick before we go.
Yes.
I can't let you get off the podcast without giving you a little bit of a hard time about your Georgia Southern over West Virginia prediction last week.
I skip over all that fun stuff.
44-0. So it was close.
It was close. It would have covered the spread if it was 56. No, I was high on Georgia Southern. I'm still going to stand by them. I'm going to ride that bus all the way into the ditch if it's not there already. Yeah, I was wrong about that. I actually had a couple of friends on West Virginia friends on Twitter give me holy heck about that. So they're telling me this is the best West Virginia team they've ever seen. They're telling me that this is as good as the 07 West Virginia team. Now they're homers in a way that makes us look objective. But I'll be interested to see what West Virginia does. But yeah, I was wrong about Georgia Southern by just about 55 points.
High risk, high reward, right?
High risk, high reward.
Yeah.
That's why I don't gamble. That's exactly why you don't gamble, because it was it looked good to me. At least I thought I was going to get away without it being mentioned. So maybe I'll just stay off the risky picks the rest of the year.
You got to do them sometimes. I just had to give you a hard time.
Yeah. Well, since you kept me on here, I did want to add being there at the game. That was a great experience. And if you ever get a chance to go to a Minnesota game or find yourself stuck in the Twin Cities, it was the nicest gathering of people I was ever around. Like, they would turn and tell me, oh, that was a good catch by your team, or oh, your coach is really good. I mean, things that we would never, ever do if we were playing somebody. So that was a good group of people to be hanging out with. So, well, on that note, we will wrap up the FrogCast. For Daniel Southern, for Trey Fallon, I'm Jeff Mitchell. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.